Picture this. It's modern-day Poland, and you are working in an archaeological dig in the 17th century cemetery near the Polish village of Pienia. And you discover something weird, but not wholly uncommon. The remains are of a child, buried face down with a padlock between its feet. And it's a little weird, yes, but it's slightly shocking. It's a remnant of an apotropaic burial, which would be the anti-vampire burial, being buried in a way to ward off evil. But where do these burials come from? And why are they so widespread? Hi, I'm Jax Marie, and welcome to Morbidly Macabre, the show where I talk about morbid stories from our past, the origin of horror tropes that we see commonly in media today, and other spooky topics that might interest me. This is a new channel, so if you enjoy what you see, please consider subscribing and liking this video, and ring the bell icon for notifications. I also stream on Twitch 5 to 6 days per week, so consider checking me out at Jax Marie Gaming. I post a new topic every Friday, and topic recommendations are greatly appreciated. Now, let's get back into the story. Apotropaic burials have been around for a long time, dating back to the early Middle Ages, and have also been seen in other Eastern European countries, like Hungary and Romania. Burials like this often occurred during times of turmoil, like war, plague, and famine, and were often signs of severe tragedy. They were used to ward off evil. Another country that is evidence of apotropaic burials is here in the United States. In 1854, in Jewett County, Connecticut, graves were exhumed and the bones rearranged to ward off the deceased from returning as vampires. Michael Bell, a Rhode Island folklorist, studies vampire exhumations and has done so for over 30 years. He has examined and documented about 50 exhumations, and according to the Smithsonian magazine, some were as old as the late 1700s. But mostly are centered around the backwoods New England, almost 200 years after the Salem witch trials. A key feature of vampire burials are mass panic, and around the 1800s, the main culprit of the hysteria in the United States was tuberculosis. Families would be wiped out by tuberculosis, and some families thought the only way to stop the tuberculosis spread, which was blamed on deceased family members coming back to feed on the living, was to exhume their bodies, and sometimes they even consumed their ashes. Families would be wiped out by tuberculosis, and some families thought the only way to stop the spread of the tuberculosis, which was being blamed on the deceased family members coming back to feed on the living life force, was to exhume the body, remove and burn the heart, and sometimes they even went so far as to consume the ashes. One such example of this is in the case of Mary Brown and her daughter Mary Olive, 20, and Mercy Lena, 19. The three women became sick with tuberculosis, wasted away, and then passed due to their illness. One of the remaining family members, George Brown, Mary Brown's husband, became convinced that something was haunting his farm and killing his family. When his son Edwin also fell ill with tuberculosis, the townspeople of Exeter, Rhode Island, and George Brown exhumed the bodies of the three women, and Mary and Mary Olive were deceased and decomposed. However, Mercy Lena was not. She was well preserved, despite having been dead for several months. Her hair and nails had grown out, and her skin still contained blood when they pricked at the skin. This confirmed to the townspeople and to George that she was a vampire. She was coming back, and she was feeding on the family. The town was in a frenzy. The village doctor tried to explain to them, like, hey, it's Rhode Island, it's cold, and it's in the middle of winter. She's not going to decompose. It was in March, and it was already too late. The townspeople removed Mercy's heart, burned it, and it was believed that the ashes were then fed to Edwin in an attempt to save his life from the illness. However, he would later succumb to his illness. Back to 17th century Poland, it wouldn't be too far-fetched to believe that people would be looking for ways to drive off the evil, plagues, war, and even a small ice age. While anti-vampire was a common term for these burials, it was also used to write off strigoi, revenants, and demons. It was a catch-all against the evil that may wander the night, back to haunt the living. Some practices were burying the bodies with a sickle around its throat, so if it were to sit up, theoretically, it would behead itself. They would also take out the heart or place a copper coin in the mouth of the deceased to ward off evil. The padlock mentioned earlier that was buried at the feet of the child was meant to hold the child in place. Same with the downward-facing burial. Other practices that were seen in Rhode Island was beheading the body and rearranging the bones so that if the person were to come back to life, the thighs would be at its neck, so it couldn't get up. Sort of like a pirate flag's Jolly Roger. Stones would also be used to weigh down the bodies, and sometimes stones would be placed in the mouth, a practice that would keep the spirit in the body. A woman's remains were discovered in Venice who had passed away in a 16th century mass grave of victims of the bubonic plague. The stone was to keep the risen dead, called noxeres, from chewing through their burial shrouds, which I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, and continuing to spread the plague to the living. And of course, one can't talk about vampires without talking about the wooden stake through the heart. Another practice that was used to keep vampires in the grave was pinning the body to the ground. One way this was done was by fastening a pole or a stake through the heart into the coffin with nails, but in some Bulgarian villages, they would bury the body with iron stakes through the heart. In one such burial, they also removed a leg and buried it next to the corpse to keep them from rising from the grave. The main theme in all of these anti-vampire burials was desperation. They were living through times of plague, turmoil, and despair, and like in today's society, they were likely trying to save themselves and protect their families. To us, burials like these don't make sense. Bodies don't come back from the dead. People don't rise up to become vampires, but during this time, that was a commonly held belief. These burials were often credited for inspiring Dracula by Bram Stoker, and who knows, maybe these burials were important to keeping the lore of the vampires in modern-day society. But that is all I have for you today. Remember, if you liked today's video, please consider hitting that like button and subscribe, and hit that bell notification. My socials are linked in the description box below, and all of the resources I used in today's video as well. I stream on Twitch 5 to 6 days a week and would appreciate you stopping by, even if it's just to say hi. Thank you again for joining me, and stay curious. Goodbye!